You're listening to the Vincast, which is supported generously by Vinus, the iPhone app which recognizes any wine with just the snap of a photo. It is a very simple app to use, yet it is completely revolutionizing the way that we enjoy wine. All you have to do is open the app on your iPhone, take a picture of the label of a wine you are enjoying, and the app will actually recognize what that wine is. Then you can make a rating or some comments about the wine and share it with your networks. So that network might be on the app itself, where you can actually follow other wine lovers and wine professionals like myself. But you can also link it up with social media networks like Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as well. You can find out real-time information about where you might be able to buy the wine and also what you might be expected to pay. Vinus is changing the way we enjoy wine. Hello and welcome to episode number 39 of the Vincast. My name is James Scaresbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino, and it is great to have you on board. It's great to hopefully have a lot of new listeners to the podcast. If this is your first time, welcome. It's good to have you on board. But of course, you can actually go back and listen to any of the previous episodes, which you can find on intrepidwino.com under the Vincast section. Now, if you are a new listener, you may not know that this podcast is about wine culture and wine people. And I try and chat with people from all different elements of the wine industry to get their own unique perspectives and backgrounds and philosophies about wine. And occasionally I'll talk about a different topic. So I'm very excited to have people getting in contact with me. Also open to any suggestions you might have about how I can improve the podcast, or if you'd like to get involved in any way, whether that is contribution or even if you'd like to be promoted on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. So on this episode, I have a young guy by the name of Tom Barry, who is the third generation winemaker for Jim Barry Wines, which is a pretty well-known winery in the Clare Valley in South Australia. Now, the Clare Valley, if you aren't aware, is very closely associated with the Riesling grape. And at the moment, we are just about to hit summer of Riesling, and there's a number of different Riesling events all around Australia to promote that fantastic variety. So part of the reason I brought Tom on was to talk about Riesling and why it's so important, particularly in the Clare Valley, but also to hear about his background as a third-generation winemaker. And it was a really interesting chat. I hope you enjoy it. Let us know if you did. And I'll be talking about some of those Riesling events after the interview. So enjoy and see you on the other side. Tom, thank you very much for joining us today on the Vincast. And I really appreciate you making some time. Obviously, I'm sure you are madly preparing for vintage.
Well, James, no worries, mate. It's no, we can always make time. But yeah, we are. We're probably a couple of weeks away from picking. But
how are things looking in the Clare?
Yeah, pretty good. So we've had we probably had 70 to 80 mils of rain last week, which was pretty good. Really freshened things up, and really sort of setting us up for a pretty solid vintage, I think, after quite a dry spring, or really dry spring, to be honest.
Awesome. So Tom, you are actually my second next generation Australia's first family wine guest. I actually had Rick, who was obviously from the Birch family wines.
Ricardo.
And obviously he is from a different state, a bit further away over in WA. But obviously his family is very intimately familiar with that great, probably underappreciated variety of Riesling. And that's part of the reason why I've invited you on, because there's some really fantastic events and activities upcoming to promote Riesling. But we'll come back to that. So for the listeners who may be unfamiliar with Jim Barry and how important that name is to Australian wine, just give us a very brief kind of background on the Barry family and their contribution to wine.
Well, James, so Jim Barry Wines was started by my grandfather. So his name was James Brazill Barry, and he graduated from Roseworthy College in 1947.
Wow.
Yeah, it really was. It was sort of one of the early, really, really early. So he was actually the 17th qualified enologist out of the Roseworthy course.
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned it on a previous episode that Roseworthy, I think, is the oldest agricultural, or certainly the oldest kind of winemaking tertiary institution in the world.
Yeah, I think I think so, and especially a lot of really really famous Australian winemakers have gone through this course, and
Mm.
it just gives you some really good foundations to build a career and make really good wine. So
Yeah.
he was actually the first sort of group after the war to go through, and he moved to Clare. He got a job in 1947 at Clare Valley Cooperative. And basically, never left. He moved to Clare. He loved it. He saw the potential to make table wine. Back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, a lot of fortifieds. But he saw the potential of Clare to go on and make dry table wine, and he saw that Riesling, Shiraz and Cabernet, were going to be really suited to Clare.
So how developed was the Clare Valley as far as a region for wine? Obviously, it's a reasonably well-known region in Australia today, particularly obviously for the dry table wines. But back in that time when there was so much fortified wine being produced in Australia, was the Clare Valley particularly big?
No, it was extremely small. So there's probably a handful of wineries that made wine.
Okay.
So and Grandpa so after finishing, he was the first qualified winemaker in Clare. So there are other winemakers here, but none that had any tertiary education. So he came to Clare with a lot of knowledge and really helped them sort of understand the chemical side of wine and how to make better wine and controlling. You're picking a little bit earlier in the vineyard, so you can control your pH for microbial spoilage and that sort of thing. So he was sort of came at it with a really scientific approach.
Okay. And obviously that was one of the first in a number of generations of winemakers who really, like, in terms of that technical understanding of wine and the scientific approach to it, really did establish Australian wine on the global scale. Now, I've had a number of people who make wine from around Adelaide, in South Australia, but you're the first person, obviously from the Clare. The Clare Valley, compared to sort of some of the more famous, some of the other regions in South Australia, is a little bit further away from Adelaide, is it not?
Yes, we are. Yep, a little bit further. So we're probably, I'd say, to be generous, we're 2 hours north of Adelaide. You can probably get there in an hour and 45, but 2 hours is probably more appropriate.
Yeah, okay. And as far as the climate of the Clare Valley, how does it differ from some of its closer cousins like the Barossa?
I'd probably describe us as continental in terms of really warm days, but then really cold nights, and we get that because we are quite high up. So we're still situated like Barossa and Eden Valley in the Mount Lofty ranges.
Yep.
So really and some of the vineyards here are close to 500 meters. So that really gives us a really good foundations for growing really good table grapes, and then Riesling really fits that into that. So
that was always one of the things I found very interesting about the Clare Valley, was that you could produce some really outstanding white wines, particularly from Riesling, but also some nice red wines as well, from Shiraz and Cabernet. It does have it seems to have a lot of diversity of microclimates, so you can actually make a range of different styles.
Oh man, absolutely. Like if you look at technical data of how hot Clare is, so we're not considered a cool climate, and probably warm climate, but yeah, it's just that attitude that we can really that enables us to make those sort of high quality Rieslings and reds that we can. If we were down at 200 meters on the flat, I think would make some pretty hot flabby wines, but it's that attitude that really sets us apart.
Now, as far as your kind of when you were growing up, you are the third generation of qualified winemakers within the Barry family. What are your kind of earliest memories of wine? Because your father took over or joined your grandfather in the winemaking, and he similarly went and studied at university. What are your earliest memories of wine? How early do you remember being aware of wine and how important it was to your family?
Oh man, I suppose I was young. You would have been 5 or 6, and you always have a little sip at the table.
Yeah.
But it was quite funny. I just remember coming into the winery as a kid and swinging on the ropes off the catwalks. I've got all these ropes that you pull up the hoses and
Sure.
up and down buckets and stuff, and that's all I remember. You come in and you'd swing on these hoses and try to go from a bit of Tarzan rope to rope. But for us, we were farmers, and sort of that's what the family did. So for me, it wasn't really any different than my friend that I went to school with, and their parents were sort of sheep or wheat farmers. We just did wine. So for me, it probably wasn't until I was a little bit older that I realised sort of the big steps that my grandpa had taken, and then dad as well, to set up Jim Barry Wine. So, and that's really why I've got into it to continue that family legacy and try to keep driving good quality wines out of Clare.
So there was a real sense of community in terms of being in that, slightly more rural area, and all the other families living in the Clare, being involved with agriculture in some way. Um, was agriculture kind of part of your education as far as high school at all?
I suppose not so much high school, but just growing up. Like we always had sheep and cattle at home as well.
Yeah.
Even you just go, before school you'd go and feed the sheep or feed the little cows, and it was just stuff like that. It's just really good. As a young kid, you just get into that sort of stuff, and you sort of get to understand agriculture, and that's sort of why I've moved into the business and the family ties as well. Like I just couldn't think of really doing anything else.
How young, obviously statute of limitations, but how young were you when you first got to try wine within the family?
Oh mate, we'd always encouraged to have a little sip around the table, and it was really growing up. You're still
Sure.
obviously very very green, but it wasn't pushed on us at all. So that's what we did. It wasn't. I could have.
Was there ever kind of an expectation that you were going to sort of follow in the family business, or were you encouraged to kind of make the decision for yourselves?
No, not at all, not at all. I could have gone off and done other things. If But yeah, for us, and
Was there ever any doubt in your mind that's what you're going to do?
oh, mate, if I was a better golfer, I'd probably be playing golf, but I wasn't good enough at golf, so that's
Potentially, a golf career is a little bit more lucrative than
yeah.
wine. Let's be honest. But obviously, the amount of people who can actually make a lot of money from playing golf is pretty small.
Yeah, exactly, mate. I realised from a young age that I wasn't going to make any money out of golf, so this was the next best thing for me.
And so you sort of decided that that's what you're going to do. And what so finishing school. What was the first step in kind of following in that path?
Yeah, well, mate, it was probably actually just a couple of years before I finished school. I was 15, so I was in year 10,
Yeah.
and that was sort of that light bulb moment where I said, okay, I want to do winemaking. But I wasn't that great at chemistry, so I just sort of knuckled down and you sort of worked on my chemistry because I
Yeah.
knew that was one of the prerequisites to get into winemaking. And worked hard at that and got through. And then I sort of got into winemaking and I was stoked. I had a year off. I worked at Yalumba in the Barossa, and then just sort of travelled around, and then I was into the winemaking the following year.
Is the approach at your lumber, because again, a large family-owned winery, well, large-ish. Uh, um, what was it a little bit different there, or did you find a lot of synergies between your lumber and Jim Barry?
Yeah, obviously they're multi generational. but their focus is on quality and making quality at every point. So that was something that I took away from there. So yeah, and that's what we try to do, make quality at every price point. So I'm trying to over deliver for the bottle of wine that you buy. So that was sort of what I took away, and it was great. They're a fantastic company and got a lot of long outstanding employees, which is what we aim for as well.
Mm. Now, as far as your studies, you were the first of the family to study winemaking after Roseworthy obviously had become part of the University of Adelaide, and then had relocated to the Waite campus, which is actually in Adelaide, or in Greater Adelaide. How did you find studying at the Waite campus?
Mate, the Waite campus was great. I've got some really good mates still from uni.
Were there a number of other kind of multi-generational, family members as well?
There actually wasn't when I went through.
Interesting. Okay.
It was interesting, and the group that I finished with, only 8 of us actually finished, which was quite funny. So we might have started with 20, and only 8 graduated from our year. So a few went to do Viti, and then a few sort of pulled out as well. So
okay,
it's very small. That class of '09 was pretty small.
Right. Interesting.
No, I think we missed out a little bit from, to be honest, going to Adelaide and not living on campus with all our mates. My old man's got some fantastic stories of Roseworthy, and living on campus, and you're sort of in each other's in each other's pocket all the time, and the relationships you make are fantastic. So
I've spoken to people who studied at Roseworthy, not necessarily in the winemaking or the viticulture, in the marketing or business side of things, and even then there was a lot of real camaraderie, and they would get together, and so the business students would get together with the winemaking, and they'd sort of swap wines, or they'd open up wines together, and it'd be a really interesting and fun collaborative environment.
Yeah, I think we tried to do that, but when you're not living on campus together, sort of you tend to sort of go off in your own direction as well. So it was really good, but yeah, I think it would have been great to go through Roseworthy still. Would have been good fun.
Yeah, you were still, I'm assuming, working vintage whilst you were studying. Were you working back at home, or were you working anywhere else?
Mate, just just in summer holidays, I'd come in and drive tractors, or winter holidays, I'd do that sort of stuff. But not too much. Pretty full on course. So 2000, the third year you actually do a vintage at uni, which was great.
Okay.
And then in fourth year they send you out to do your placement. So you do a 10 or 12 week placement at a winery.
Yep.
So they were the sort of the experiences I had while I was there, and I tried to go to Shaw and Smith for my fourth year placement, which was great. So yeah, they're fantastic winery, and fantastic people up there, and make really, really smart wine. So that was my decision to head up there to the Adelaide Hills.
And after the studies, you had the opportunity to do a bit of travel and working overseas as well.
I did, mate. Yep.
Now, again, talking of Riesling, I understand you actually got the opportunity to work in Germany.
I did.
What vintage was that?
That was 2010.
Okay.
So
wow, what a vintage to be working.
I know, mate. It was interesting. It was very interesting, but I learned a lot.
I travelled through Germany, visiting wineries in early 2012, and most of what I was tasting was from that 2010 vintage, and I was just blown away at the quality. A lot of people were saying that it was a smaller vintage, but what they got was just unbelievably good fruit, and really concentrated. And when they were telling me the levels of acidity, I just couldn't believe it. But then they said, but it's balanced by these really high levels of sugar as well.
Oh, mate, you're spot on. Yeah, 2010, low yields, high acidity. It was really interesting, and they do the double salt acidification, so they actually de-acidify. So we did a bit of that, which was interesting.
And something that is completely you would never do that in Australia.
No. Well, maybe in 2011. But
Yeah, maybe.
no, we don't. So yeah, deacidifying was interesting, but yeah, it was just another one of those vintages. That's why you go overseas to learn different things and to see how they do it, and to deal with this, sort of see how they deal with their sort of vintage conditions, which are completely different to ours.
Now, you worked vintage at Dr. Lawson,
I did, mate. Yeah.
and obviously Dr. Lawson is probably one of the most prominent producers in the Mosel region of Germany, and they obviously are sourcing fruit from lots and lots of different vineyards. Did you have a particular favorite vineyard that you were taking from?
Yeah, I love Ernie's Erziger Wirtsgarten vineyard.
Mm.
So yeah, those beautiful wines out of there, especially like the Spätlés and the Oslés out of there are just stunning wines.
Were you doing any picking yourself?
I didn't get out to the picking, mate. So it was me and another Aussie guy, and we were pressing all the Riesling. So we'd come in about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we'd just start, processing.
Mm.
So that was great.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I happened to, that same year that I was visiting, I came back and worked vintage at a couple of wineries in Germany, and it's actually been my only winemaking experience. I'm ashamed to say I should do some more. I felt like to a certain extent I was missing out because you're really only making white wines, and the winemaking is a little bit less involved with the whites when you're sort of just pressing and then fermenting, and that's kind of it. With reds, obviously you're doing plunging and that sort of thing. But I'm guessing that working at Dr. Lawson winery, there would have been a fair amount of tanks.
Yeah, mate, there was this, but just the vineyards, how they get the fruit, the pristine fruit from the vineyard into the winery, and then it was pretty crazy. It was just me and another Aussie guy, as I said, and they said, "Okay, you boys are pressing the vintage, so fair bit of responsibility." But I don't know. I suppose I was pretty clear in my mind what I wanted to do, and that was to set out to go to really good Riesling producers and see what they do, and then hopefully bring a few little tricks home, and sort of continue the Jim Barry Riesling winemaking.
Did you get the opportunity to travel to any other wine regions?
While I was there, I didn't, no, unfortunately. No, 2010, but 2011 I did one in Austria with
Okay.
with Bert Salomon. So that was 2010 and 2011. Did a couple of Riesling vintages then, which was fantastic. So yeah, really, yeah, as I said, sort of trying to focus on Riesling and what they're doing really well.
And so how did you kind of what you learned, particularly in terms of Riesling, how did you kind of bring that back to Australia I'm assuming after that, you came back and, okay, I'm joining the family winery, I'm now making the wines, or was that, were you sort of chasing the vintage, so to speak? You would come back, off season in Europe and make the wines back at home?
Oh man, I suppose if I'm understanding your question, I did. I went across to do that, but I didn't really want to stamp my own authority on what we're doing, because we've been doing, we've been making Riesling at Jim Barry for a long time. So it was just about tweaking a few little things that I took from these vintages and bringing them home, and just trying to get better, because I'm not about just changing for the sake of change, just because I've come in and I've done a couple of vintages overseas, so think about things very deeply, and what we can do better, and especially styles, and yeah, really sort of, and in the vineyard as well, because obviously over there that's a big thing. It's all the vineyard.
Mm.
We've tried to up our game here. We always try to get better, and that's the key. 2015, we'll try to make the best wines that we can, and make better wines than we did in 2014.
So tell me about the sort of wines that Jim Barry is making these days.
Mate, so we're really just trying to make really clean, aromatic white wines, or Riesling. So we're really, we've been pretty clear, probably over the last 10 years, we've only really made Riesling, a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc, but we're getting out of that. So yeah, for us, it's all about Riesling, and we want to be seen as a Riesling producer, in Australia, which is our biggest Riesling market, but then overseas as well.
And there's obviously another sort of side to the Riesling story for you and your brother Sam, and that is with Clos Clare. Tell me a little bit about how you guys got the opportunity to take on the Clos Clare story.
Oh man, this is phenomenal. Actually, we so when Dad and his brothers bought Florida from Lindemans back in 1986. So this was a huge move for them. They were about my age. So yeah, they're 26, 27. And it was when Chardonnay was booming. So they Jim wanted to buy it, but if he actually bought it, Grandma was going to divorce him. So because Grandpa in 1979 went out for a Sunday drive and bought Lodge Hill. So there was no way that he was going to be allowed to buy another vineyard. But he goes, "Come on, boys, this is a bargain. It's one of the great Australian Riesling vineyards, and it's up for sale." So they grabbed it, and then there was a small house on the vineyard that they sold, with a few acres of Riesling, and they sold that just to help finance the rest of the vineyard. And then that was where Clos Clare started. So Clos Clare started in 1991 from this small house and the small bit of dry grown Riesling, and then in 2007. Then they approached us and said, "Would you like to buy it back?" So this was phenomenal. So yeah, so 2008 was our first vintage of Clos Clare. So 2008 Clos Clare Riesling, and yeah, we've it's been fantastic. So we don't make it at Jim Barry Wines. We make it at our friend Daniel Wilson from the Wilson Vineyards.
Mm-hmm.
So another he makes some fantastic Riesling and yeah, sort of hand picked and then put it through his winery and ferment it out. So it's Clos Clare's been great. It was a really good learning experience for us, getting to Melbourne and Sydney and meeting and sommeliers and because it's a very small quantity of wine and probably a few doors that we probably don't get into with Jim Barry.
So tell me what your impressions of the way that Riesling kind of sits in the particularly in the Australian market these days. Now, Riesling has always been kind of the wine professionals' darling.
Mm-hmm.
It's one that a lot of people who work in the industry and wine writers, that kind of thing, they'll always choose it themselves. Whereas the consumers for so long, they obviously, you just said Chardonnay was booming in the 80s and in the 90s. And then as consumers kind of wanted to move away from those very rich, fat, oaky kind of Chardonnays, they went to the other extreme. But rather than sort of choosing Riesling, which is a shame, they went for Sauvignon Blanc, which obviously allowed the New Zealand boom to really kick on. Riesling has always kind of continued to shine, and I for a long time have felt that Riesling is one of the best value varieties in Australia, provided that it comes from the right spot. How do you think that Riesling has been going a little bit more recently? Obviously, there's been lots of energy around it and events to promote it.
I think it's still a very industry-driven variety. I think consumers are understanding a bit more, but there's still a lot of consumers that still think it's that old sweet sort of German style of Riesling, and it's quite amazing that this sort of stigma stayed with it for all these years. So, it's events like Riesling Down Under that hopefully there's on the Sunday it's the Riesling rye that'll just move people in that right direction and but I think it is people are understanding a little bit more. We still don't want it to get too popular because then people overplant it, overcrop it.
Well, in the same way that it happened with Chardonnay, in the same way it's happening with Sauvignon Blanc, people ask for it and then they kind of there's sort of a maturity phase and they go, oh, most of this is crap.
Yeah, and we just don't want people to get into it for the wrong reasons. So we're a bit. So I suppose we're purists really. We want to make the best wines we can. We make them low extraction rates. So the lower phenolics we can make, the better, and try to make pure examples of Clare Riesling. So hopefully if it gets too popular, the big boys might get into it and they sort of might not make the style that reflects the variety.
Do you find that there's still a bit of a misunderstanding and that in a lot of consumers' minds, Riesling automatically equals sweet?
I think so. Yeah, I think people, whether they get fed this by the older generation, or because even a few people, mid-30s and stuff, they might still think it's sweet. Whether they're drinking the wrong Riesling, I don't know, but yeah,
I still remember like my first boss in wine, when I was working in retail, he would still, and this is in 2004, he would still refer to it as Rhine Riesling.
yeah. Oh, that's mate. I love that. I've just been down in our shed earlier today, and I've pulled out. There was a 1982 Jim Barry Lodghill Rhine Riesling, and it's classic.
That's my birthday. You're gonna have to send it to me, mate.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, mate. Well, because we were pulling out some old Rieslings for the Riesling Down Under, Riesling Through the Ages. So we finally settled on a Lodghill 1986 Rhine Riesling.
Wow.
I'll take a photo of it and I'll give you an email tomorrow.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll tell you these old labels are classic.
Now, Riesling, obviously, I think to a large extent, Riesling suffers the same difficulties, but that has that love affair with certain people globally, because I think I know German Riesling still has difficulty in selling, or at least communicating how good the wine is. And that was kind of the idea behind the Summer of Riesling, which I believe was started from a guy up in New York City, and which did kind of make its way to Australia, particularly in Sydney. Are you guys involved with Summer of Riesling at all?
Yes, we will be. So I know Clare Valley's got a stand at Summer of Riesling. Personally, I'm not. We'll be right at vintage. I think it's
It is a tough time of year for you guys.
I think it's is it 18th of February, I think, off the top of my head?
Yeah, I think February is the big month for it.
Yeah, so yeah, but Paul Greco, who started it, he's phenomenal with what he's done for Riesling. And yeah, we've been lucky enough. He's poured a few of our wines on at his bar in New York, and really got people sort of got their ears up and sort of listening to what Riesling does well. So, and this is what we've done. Like we've always supported these Riesling events. And it was really nice to be asked by Franklin Estate to join them in co-sponsoring Riesling Down Under with Pikes and Framingham from New Zealand. So I think it's it's going to be fantastic.
I'm actually interested because in the past, and I think it was every other year, Franklin Estate would have their international Riesling tasting, and got quite a lot of press, and there were lots of producers who would be part of it. But I think they were the kind of the impetus behind it. Whereas Riesling Down Under is a little bit different. It's a bit more collaborative.
Very, very similar setup for the event. So very basically there's 3 days, 2 or 3 days, and basically we just thought we'd be able to maybe get a few more numbers and get a few more people along if it was that collaboration. So Franklin did an absolutely amazing job. Their wines are phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think just spread the workload a little bit as well. Get a couple more wineries in.
Early on for me as a wine professional, Pikes was always the benchmark Riesling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I started to buy in the secondary market wines which had a bit of age on them, whenever I'd see Pikes Riesling, it was something I'd kind of always try and snap up, and I had some in my cellar. I might even still have a bottle. And one of the really important things for me with Riesling is screw cap.
Yes.
Now, obviously, one of your neighbours in Jeffrey Grosset, I know he kind of embraced screw cap a long time ago, and clearly, people like Jeff and other Riesling producers have shown the potential for aging Riesling under screw cap. Do you agree with that? Because obviously Riesling was, when I started learning about wine, Riesling was explained in terms of the aging. It was great for kind of a couple of years, and then it would really dip down and just sort of shut down. And then after sort of, depending on the wine, somewhere between 7 and maybe even 15 years, it would just start to come out, and the wine was quite different. But I understand that aging on a screw cap, it's not quite the same. What have you kind of had that kind of experience, or what do you reckon?
Yeah, I suppose it's just the variability with screw caps that we're just not seeing like we did with the corks. So yeah, I think you might still get that dip, but I think it comes back into the next phase of its life a lot quicker. And as you said, yeah, Jeff, that was he's really done well. And I think for Clare though, looking at the bigger picture, what the Clare winemakers did as a collaboration of all getting behind the screw cap back in 2000, because if you get, it's pretty hard to get. Imagine that, getting 40 wineries in Italy to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So to get everyone going, okay, we're going to do a screw cap, and I say this, everywhere I go, about and that I think that says a lot about Clare as a community and as a winemaking community. That they said, okay, well, we're focused on quality. This is the steps that we've got to take to get the quality, and let's do it. And yeah, no one really blinked an eye. They just all of a sudden from 99 to 2000, we've gone from cork in 99, and then everyone's got a screw cap in 2000. So I think that's the really clear message of how Clare was at the forefront of it as a collaboration.
Now, as my second official AFFW guest, how have you guys found it's been really fantastic to kind of be part of that group of really, really strong Australian names as far as wine?
Oh, absolutely. Like I still pinch myself because we're 55 years old, Jim Barry Wine, so we're extremely young. In terms of the group, there's people there like Tyrrells and Henschke's and Yalumba who are 150 years. So we feel extremely lucky to be a part of the group. But I think the best thing for me has been this next generation. Meeting blokes like Rich Birch. You've got the Brown girls. There's a whole group of people, and we get together. Not enough, but we get together a couple of times a year. This year we're actually heading to WA to do Howard Park, and that's been the best thing I think. But to meet these other young guys and girls who are sort of going through similar things in their wineries, and you bounce off each other, you ask them questions, and it's a really, really good thing. And then to meet these old boys as well, absolute legends of the industry, who's just you wouldn't get close to otherwise, and it's just been fantastic.
I'm sure any event with the Osborns is going to be fun.
Oh, geez, I tell you, Darry's a legend. Oh, he's just so funny. Absolutely cracks me up every time.
Now, tell me, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah, mate.
The Clare Valley and Riesling are synonymous.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the Clare Valley so good for Riesling?
Oh, mate, I'd have to say, it's the altitude, through we are in the Mount Lofty Ranges. But I think it's a clear message that we've sent from an early time, and that screw cap's been one of them. But it's the companies that have stuck to Riesling for the last 25 or 30 years. You've got families like Pikes, Paulettes, Mitchells that have just stuck there and made Riesling and put these wines out of the market at a really good value and good quality wines. And people that have drunk these wines over time, and you said to yourself, James, that you found old Pikes and you snap them up on the secondary market. These are the people that have continued to make really good wines. They're community people, and I think that's why people sort of can show that relation to Clare and Riesling, and people who and I don't know if you've ever done a gourmet weekend, mate. May, we always used to have a big gourmet festival, so we were sort of the first region behind doing a big food and wine festival back in the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah, we had far out. What was it? It was 30 years, I reckon. So we were sort of the early ones of that, getting young people up, drinking Riesling, and it's been really good. So I think we're very lucky. We're small family wineries up here, and striving to make good wines.
Fantastic. Well, look, I do appreciate your time, Tom. Obviously, in preparations for all the different Riesling events, but also vintage. Now, tell me, give us all of the details where they can find your wine. So, websites, social media, whatever you can reel off.
Oh, geez, yeah, websites. So our website, www.jimbarry.com is always one.
And if people go to the websites, they can find, possibly stockists, but more importantly, how they can keep in touch with you as far as social media like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Absolutely, mate. Yep.
Fantastic. Look, I look forward to catching up with you. Hopefully, I might be able to come along and interview a couple of our international guests next month. But I'm keen to try some of the Clos Clare wines myself.
Oh, mate, we'd love to. We'll make sure you interview Ernie. He is an absolute cracker.
I'm sure he won't disagree. I believe he likes talking.
Oh, mate, absolutely loves it. He's fantastic. He's an inspiration, and Etienne Hugel, who is another very, very funny Frenchman.
Fantastic. Look, I appreciate your time, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Yeah, good on you, James. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, mate.
Tom talking all about Riesling. As I mentioned, there are lots of different Riesling events coming up, particularly in Melbourne and Sydney. So in Sydney, the website is summerofriesling.com.au, and that is running on the 15th of February, but there's going to be lots of other events around Sydney as well. And the website for Melbourne is rieslingdownunder.com.au, and that is running for several days in the second week of February. But there's going to be lots of other Riesling-based events at wine bars and restaurants around town, so do a bit of research. A great resource, of course, is What's Up Buttercup, the events website. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at IntrepidWino, and you can follow the podcast on Twitter at the Vincast to get news about all the new episodes. You can like me on Facebook, facebook.com/IntrepidWino, and at my website, intrepidwino.com, you will find all the previous episodes of the podcast, lots of different writings that I've made over the past few years about my experiences and travels, and you can also find links to the podcast on Stitcher and iTunes. And if you go there, you can subscribe, so you'll download the episode automatically. And if you do subscribe on either of those platforms, I do please ask that you rate and review the podcast. 5 stars would be fantastic, of course, but it really does help me out a lot. Until next time, bye.